it's here. After months of waiting, in fact years of waiting, Persona 5 is finally here. With every iteration of the Persona series, new things and changes are made from its previous entries. New characters, new themes, and a new story completely different from the rest of the series. Persona 5 not only continues that trend but creates a fun and adventurous narrative that isn't just one of my favorite RPGs of this year, but of my life. Persona 5 puts you into the shoes of the protagonist who goes by the nickname Joker, Akira for you manga enthusiasts out there. One night when walking home, the protagonist sees a woman on the street being harassed by an intoxicated man. Wanting to save her, the protagonist gets in between the two and knocks the man over. In his stumble, the man gets hurt and presses charges against the protagonist, resulting in the court system having him expelled from his school. At the will of the court, our protagonist's parents are pressured to move him to Shibuya to live with the family friend. Here we have the setup and theme of Persona 5, a boy forced into a new setting and school with a first-hand view of what corruption of the justice system looks like. If Persona 3 was dark-toned and Persona 4 was more lighthearted and comedic tone, then I'd categorize Persona 5 as a mix of both, dealing with both really dark and corrupt themes while also adding in a dash of comedic and lighthearted moments between friends. Much like previous games in the series, you spend your days as a high school student living in a new setting and going to a new school. You play the part of a normal teenager by day by attending classes, studying, going on dates, and working a part-time job like any other student. While at night, you spend your time exploring mysterious dungeon worlds from another realm. Unlike previous entries in the series, Persona 5 doesn't take long to get into the nitty-gritty of the gameplay. In fact, you're thrown into a dungeon really early on in the game rather than forced into an elongated tutorial like previous games in the series. During the day, you'll go to school, meet new people, and make new friends that will slowly integrate into your story. You'll participate in mundane student tasks like studying for exams, socializing with other students, and working a garbage minimum wage job. It's a life simulator of sorts, but taking place in Japan. These gameplay moments aren't just filler for the game though. While doing these tasks during the day, you'll earn stats for your character like intelligence and courage that not only help you do more interesting things during the day, but also help you when exploring dungeons. The relationship and trust you create with other characters also contribute to your adventures in the dungeon world, making not only strong relationships with friends but also close connections with people that can supply you with items for your dungeon crawling. These relationships are called cooperations in Persona 5, and if you played previous games in the series you may know them by a different name called social links, but they act and work relatively the same. As you meet up and interact with characters more often, you'll build a closer bond to them that'll benefit you in the long run. Your sandbox playground is a pretty large one. It's by no means an open world game like most AAA Western games right now, but it's a decently sized sandbox game that lets you explore different parts of Japan like Shibuya, Shinjuku, and Akasaka Metsuke. The environments feel much more lively since you're exploring a much larger city rather than a rural town too. There's also a ton of NPCs populating the city, making it truly feel like you're exploring Japan's busy nightlife. Walking by NPCs, you'll hear the chatter and gossip of what's going on in the human world and how the actions of yourself and your team in the dungeon world are affecting the real world. Speaking of dungeon crawling, Persona 5 changes up the structures of its dungeons compared to the rest of the series. Persona 3's dungeons were constructed around this giant tower where you progress from floor to floor. In Persona 4, dungeons were themed around specific characters and some floors were static while others were randomized or puzzles. Persona 5's dungeon design takes it to a whole new level though. Dungeons are definitely larger and feature way more interactive puzzle elements than the previous two games combined. In contrast though, these dungeons are all predetermined or pre-designed, meaning that when you go through the dungeon all together, you'll essentially know the layout of everything in it. Originally I thought I disliked this, but the fact that these dungeons are much bigger and also follow a more interesting theme with the puzzle elements related to them, I found myself having a lot more fun with these dungeons. The designs of the dungeon are also more 3D-like, meaning that you can climb objects, find secret paths to secret rooms, and there's an elevation to everything pretty much. Dungeons feel much more alive rather than a simple hallway themed with the different wallpaper music for each character. It truly does feel like a modern Persona game in this aspect. Dungeons in Persona 5 almost act like infiltration missions. You and your party that you call the Phantom Thieves are infiltrating dungeons for whatever specific reason. Throughout the dungeons you'll find demons guarding hallways and rooms, and it's your choice on how to tackle these enemies. You can go full on guerrilla warfare and just rush them, or sneak up to them for a surprise attack. Each dungeon has an awareness meter that increases as your enemies discover you before you discover them. If it reaches 100%, you'll actually be forced out of the dungeon and be forced to start the next day. When you do attack or get attacked by an enemy, you are thrown into this turn-based battle system that looks absolutely stunning. Quite honestly, this is some of the best UI design I've seen in a video game in a very long time. It's beautiful and dare I say it's sexy in design. All your moves and tactics are mapped to face buttons on the controller, so you're no longer just digging through menus trying to find the right option. You can use a melee attack, a gun/projectile weapon, or your classic Persona skills. For those new to the series, you can think of personas as Pokemon or creatures you can collect. These are creatures that you control that can perform special attacks usually themed after elements like fire, ice, or lightning. As the main character, you can switch between your personas on the fly during your turn in battle. When fighting demons, certain move types will deal more damage than others and just be relatively more effective. Once again, just like a game of Pokemon, you have to match up the effective moves against certain enemies for the best use of your attack. The personas you get in this game are actually won over by defeating these demons. When you manage to land an effective attack on all the enemies in a battle, you'll get the option to interrogate the demon. You can either haggle them for money, haggle them for an item, or convince them to join your group as a persona, or just straight up murder them for the XP on your current personas. As you beat up more enemies with your personas, they'll start to grow with each XP you earn, growing in level, stats, and earning you skills to help you in battle. Now outside of the main story dungeons, there's actually sort of a side dungeon system that's more reminiscent of the dungeons in Persona 4 and Persona 3. These dungeons are called mementos, and they're themed to look like an underground subway station that contains the hearts of NPC characters that essentially are side quests that don't directly relate to the main story. Visually speaking, Persona 5 is a beautiful game with so much great design choices not only in the gameplay, but down to the UI system. The way the options menu just glides over the main gameplay and how it transitions between battle and dungeon crawling gameplay is so smooth, it just screams attention to detail. The one con I'll give it is that the character models and city environments could be better looking. While the game is pretty good looking, it's no secret that in 2017 this looks and pretty much is a PS3 game that was later designed and also added over to the PS4 midway through its development. It runs at 720p 30 frames per second on the PS3 and that gets bumped up to 1080p 30 on the PS4. But it's hardly a notable change outside of some sharper looking models. With that said, if you compare Persona 5 to its predecessors, it's made quite apparent how much has changed visually, looking much more like Atlus' other game Catherine than the blocky 3D models in Persona 3 and Persona 4. After all, both of these games were technically PS2 games that just got remastered on PSP and PS Vita. In terms of the voice acting, you have the choice of playing the game both in English or Japanese dub, as this title features dual audio. The feature is treated as DLC, but it will be free forever. I had both the English and Japanese versions of the game, so I got the chance to play through both of them. While I prefer the Japanese voice acting, Atlus America did a great job casting the actors to play the main cast. The protagonist is played by Xander Mobus, who you may recognize as the Super Smash Bros. Wii U announcer, and Morgana is played by Cassandra Morris, who is also known as the voice of Leafa in Sword Art Online and Taiga in the anime Toradora. The English cast does a great job of not only playing their characters, but also capturing the internal struggles that each of the characters have to face throughout the game. In my opinion, the Persona series has always had great music, and I'm so happy to report that Persona 5 not only continues the trend, but it offers some of my favorite music in the entire series. Persona 5's music can be categorized as acid jazz, and it's freaking sick. Everything is catchy from the simple tunes that play as you walk through the rainy streets of Shibuya to the last surprise battle theme song. While I got tired after a few hours of listening to Time to Make History over and over in Persona 4, I'm over 100 hours into my first and second playthrough of Persona 5 and I'm still listening to the game's soundtrack outside of me playing the game for review. Speaking of playthroughs, you can expect to take up at least a solid 80 hours of gameplay before finishing your first playthrough of Persona 5. That's not even mentioning that when you beat the game just a single time, it unlocks some extra things for a second playthrough that the series is known for as New Game Plus. All in all, Persona 5 is an excellent JRPG, and I know a lot of people are going to ask if I like this over Persona 4 Golden. Yes. I honestly didn't expect it to beat Persona 4 Golden for me since I have an emotional attachment to those characters in that game. Yet I found myself not only enjoying this game's story, but the cast of characters in it as well. Although they may be different from the likes of Yu, Chie, and Yukiko, I found myself loving the protagonists Anne and Ryuji just as much, if not more. Gameplay is solid with a ton of things for you to do that should keep you playing for days on end. My only real criticism of the game is that it doesn't look visually like a 2017 PS4 game should look like, but even that can be attributed to its long development cycle and the fact that it started off as a last generation game, like the recent Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild game. Regardless, Persona 5 is not only a fun and entertaining game for fans of the series, but a great game for those of you just looking to play a new JRPG or wanting to dip their toes into the genre for the very first time. Luckily, you don't need to play any of the other previous games in the series to play this one. Just be warned though, the Phantom Thieves may steal your heart. Thank you all very much for watching this review, and as always, if you have any questions about the game, I encourage you to ask them in the comment section below. While you wait for my next video, you can click or tap on the icon on screen to go check out my Binding of Isaac Afterbirth Plus review for the Nintendo Switch. You can click my little cartoony face to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you all once again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.